Happy Thursday, FlossTube. Hello, crafty friends. How's everybody doing today? My name's Caroline. Welcome back to my channel. My channel where I talk about all things crafty. And today I am bringing back a video, video series, a whole series of videos. I've been receiving some funny stories from crafters, and I read them to you. I share them with you, so we just can spend some time together. You can hear other people's interesting, funny, or possibly last time we had a rather romantic story that won my heart, and you can do some crafting while we visit together. I wanted to share one of my new mugs with you because I bought 2 of these from John Valentine, the potter from near Winnipeg, the man who did the Luna mug and also my my Savon mug. His partner Charlie Waters is the artist, and they work together. They are the Canvas and Clay Gallery, and I posted these on Instagram the other day, and I said, whenever I have an urge to take a pottery class, and it happens, you know, every now and then, I think, because I would love to learn how to throw pottery, how to throw pots. What's the proper terminology there? I love pottery, and I get that little urge to take a class, and I think, you better not, because I know myself, and I have a propensity of if I do something, I tend to go all in, and I want to buy all the stuff. So, throw back to that time that I took weaving, and I learned on a table loom, and for my birthday I asked for one of the women who took classes at the shop was selling a floor loom. It was like an 8 harness loom, and that's what I asked for as my big birthday gift. And have I ever used that loom? No, I have not, but my family likes to tease me about it, so I figure it's gotten its value out of them bothering me about it. I think I just have I have a little smudge on my glasses there. So, and since I need to read some funny stories here, we'll just make sure that those are clean and ready to go. But I do have my coffee. I hope you have a drink, because I've got some stories to share with you. So I had to poke through my list. I have saved all of the stories that I received in a separate folder. And I believe the last story I told you was Elizabeth's story about the glitter. Do you remember Elizabeth's story about all the glitter they were kids, and they were, anyways, I won't retell it now, but that's where I ended in my list. I'm just getting things straight in my mind. So the next story that I received was from Wendy. And so these were stories that were sent to me way back in February. That's how long it's taken me to get to this. Now, Wendy's story, I'm not sure that it's funny because it involves crafting injury, but I think that it's one of those stories that we can all be like, oh, I can relate to that. You know what I mean? Anyways, so let me tell you Wendy's story. So, hello, Caroline. When you asked for funny stories, this one came immediately to mind. It spans a period of about 13 years, but I promise to give you the Reader's Digest condensed version. About 13 or 14 years ago, while my mum was visiting me from out of province, my quite elderly father-in-law took ill while our family doctor was away on vacation. So Mum and I had to bring him to the emergency. He was put on a bed in a curtained-off area, and I knew we were in for a very long wait because of tests that had to be taken and waited on. I decided to make a quick trip home to pick up my stitching because I had many hours of waiting to do. Mum and I ran in, grabbed a bite to eat, gathered up my current crochet project, shoved it in a cloth tote bag, and rushed back to the car to head back to the hospital. Out the door, locked the door, purse shut, and project bag over my arm, I jumped into the car, Mum in the passenger seat. I quickly pulled the door shut with the intention of tossing both bags into the back seat before pulling out of the driveway. However, by some freak of accident, when I pulled the door closed, my bags got squished between the door and me, driving the crochet hook through the side of my bag and into my left thigh. Ouch. Because the bags were still over my arm, I needed Mum to come around to help me get out of the car with the bag and hook attached to my thigh. Yikes. I did something that I realize now was not too wise, but I extracted the hook myself, cleaned up the wound, and headed back to the hospital. Once there, I proceeded to explain to my father-in-law why we were a little longer than expected. An ER nurse overheard and insisted on checking my leg and convinced me I needed a tetanus shot for good measure. Those ER nurses, they know what they're talking about. I'll tell you a little story about my mom in a moment. My mom was an ER nurse for many, many years. Okay. We had a laugh when she said that this was the first time she ever had to write a report of a crochet hook wound. All was well, and we chuckled over the story many times. Fast forward to last summer. My husband and I were sitting on the back deck having morning coffee on a lovely sunny morning. I, of course, was working on knitting a pair of socks. For whatever reason, I set my socks and needles on my lap and we chatted for a bit. Unbeknownst to me, my fourth needle had slid down off of my lap and landed pretty much straight up, with the point sticking into the outdoor patio rug, and was leaning against my leg. I had no idea. When I went to get up to get a coffee refill, I felt a sharp pain in my left shin, thinking maybe a bee or an insect. When I looked down, to my dismay, my knitting needle was driven into my shin. Yikes. I kid you not. I bent down to get it and it was almost bent in half. Holy doodle. Thankfully, they were not my bamboo ones, or things might have been worse. I made a bit of a whimper and dropped back down to my chair while holding my needle. I showed it to my husband, who quizzically asked, "What happened?" When I explained and showed him my shin, his mouth dropped open and he said, "If I hadn't been here, I wouldn't have believed it could even happen." I had to laugh when it was all over. I mean, how many people do you know who has driven a crochet hook into their thigh and a knitting needle into their shin of the same leg? Thankfully, I was up to date with my tetanus shots and my husband was able to straighten my needle. So I was able to finish my socks and all was not lost. Now, there is the sign of a true crafter, right? To get out of your shin, straighten it out, carry on with the project. Oh, that is so funny. I am enclosing a pic of my wounded needle. Unfortunately, I didn't get pictures of the first wound, just a tiny scar, but you can't see that. Crafting is not for the faint of heart, from Wendy. That is, I think the best part there is that your husband straightened the needle and you carried on with a sock. I think that's pretty great. Wow. Your poor leg. My mother, I mentioned my mother was an emergency room nurse in the, in a town in Ontario near where we grew up. And when she was in the hospital she was in the hospital having my brother. So my brother is 8 years younger than I am. So I was almost 8 years old, or I would have been 8 years old. And my mother was in the hospital having my brother. And so I was at home with my father. And, you know, back then when you had a baby, you were in the hospital for a few days. Now, if everything is okay, you generally tend to go home quite quickly. But my mother had been in the hospital. I think she was in the hospital for 3 or 4 days, maybe even a week. But I remember that time spent, my dad's gonna be thrilled I'm telling this story because they watch the podcast. So, you know, I remember that there might have been a few piles of laundry around the house and maybe a few piles of dishes, but my dad worked full time and, you know, he was caring for me all by himself while my mom was at the hospital. So I remember vividly, because I remember the kid's name, and I'll tell you his first name. I won't tell you his full name just because in the interest of the innocent, though, I can assure you at the time he was not so innocent. His first name was Doug. And we were in library class at school. And for some reason, Doug had a freshly sharpened pencil, and he reached over and he jabbed it into my hand. For what reason? I wasn't bugging him. I wasn't doing anything. I was just sitting there. And in fact, I could still probably find the scar if I looked hard enough. But he jabbed his freshly sharpened pencil into my hand, and the tip of the lead broke off into my hand. And, you know, I was 8 years old. I don't really remember what I did. I'm sure I cried. And then I went home, and I guess my dad, I don't even remember what he thought to do about it, or if I'd even told him. I don't remember, but I can remember showing it to my mother when my father took me to the hospital that night to visit her. That I showed it to my mom, that I had this little bit of lead stuck in my hand, and my mother said, Patrick, you have to take her and somebody has to remove that out of her hand. So while my mother was there having a baby, one of my mother's nursing friends took me off into one of their little surgical suites, and someone there removed the lead from my hand. So how fortuitous was that? Anyways, those ER nurses, you know, they boy, my mom always had some stories. So anyways, I'm off track here. Okay, the next funny crafting story, because getting pencil lead stuck in your hand is not particularly crafty, is from Aniko. Aniko, I've gotten to know Aniko a little bit through the shop. I just love her first name. I just think that's one of the most beautiful names I've ever seen. So Aniko says, "Hi Caroline, I've enjoyed listening to all the fun craft stories. At first I thought that I had none to share, but then I remembered my dimension kit I stitched a few years ago. I moved to the UK in 2001 as a 20-something, and after a few years as an au pair, I finally got a job, rented a flat, and moved in with my boyfriend. I worked for a recruitment company at the time based on the High Street shopping mall street in the UK. At the time, there was now I realize, an amazing needlework shop that I ventured into. I saw all of these dimensions, and I'm sure other makes of cross-stitch kits. And I remember how much I loved stitching, embroidering when I was a child. So I chose so I thought, not too intimidating little kit, an orchid in a Chinese ceramic pot. That reminds me of one that Letitia was stitching, a really, really gorgeous. Letitia is the Crafty Curator on YouTube. If you haven't watched her, go check her out. Letitia, the Crafty Curator, and that's CRAFTYCUR, Curator. And Letitia was stitching an Orchid Dimensions kit. I'm sure of it. It's beautiful. I'm wondering if this was the same one. I took it home excitedly and opened it up. It had the floss, the chart, and the fabric. And then I realized that something was a bit amiss. The fabric that the kit came with was a natural colored linen. I'd only ever stitched on Ada, and there was no one to show me how to transition to the new fabric. No floss tube either yet to help. But I persevered and started stitching, which you can imagine was really hard. I had to sort the floss, work on 2/2, and also didn't really keep my stitches laying as they should. So if you're a new stitcher, the difference between fabrics can be quite different. If you look at Ada fabric and you look at a linen style fabric, the threads are individual and linen, and 2/2 means that you're using 2 strands of floss over two strands of floss over 2 linen threads. That's what 2/2 means. Long story, as you might say. I put it away in our bedroom. We lived in a 1-bedroom flat at the time. A year or 2 later, I wanted to find it again, and it was nowhere to be seen. I turned the bedroom over, looked behind the wardrobe, but nothing. Then I checked in the living room, nothing. I forgot about it again for a year or 2. We had a heavy chest of drawers in our living room from the 50s, where the bottom was a very deep drawer full of books. I went to take one out, and it slipped behind the drawer wall when I pulled it out. I had to unpack the whole thing, which took me a while. I think you will guess what I found hiding there. My long lost cross-stitch kit. All finished as well. It was there all those years. I hope you enjoy my story and have a nice week. So yeah, isn't that the thing? I mean, I have lost the occasional whip. And then you find it again and it's like, you know, the sun comes out because you've missed it and you didn't remember that you'd missed it all those years ago that you were looking for it originally, and it's like having a brand new project all over again. So how fun is that? Okay, this next one is from Carol. All right, so Carol writes, Dear Caroline, I enjoy your YouTube channel. It feels like a visit with a friend and is a bright spot in my day. Well, right back at you, Carol. That's why I do these videos, because it is like visiting with a friend. I agree. Thank you. My story goes back many years as my children are adults now. I enjoyed watching Aileen's craft show on TV. Aileen of the craft glue fame. Am I pronouncing that right? Is it Aileen or Eileen? I'm not sure. I don't know. At the time, they offered a craft club in which you would receive a package from them monthly. The catchphrase at the end of the promo or advertisement was, just open your mailbox and craft. My spunky 6-year-old youngster would chime in, just open your mailbox and crap. Oh dear. My family still gets a chuckle out of this every now and then. That sounds like something one of my kids at the age of 6 would have said. In fact, it sounds like something that my 13-year-old would still say to this day. So, yes. It's funny how easily one can substitute the word craft with several other different kinds of words. Next up, we have Sharon. So this next one is from Sharon. Hi Caroline, I was watching your floss tube last night and had a great time listening to the stitching stories. A few years ago, I spent 2 days going through charts that I had stitched and some that I was trying to figure out why I'd bought. I made a stack of charts that I took to the Goodwill, knowing that some stitcher would find them because I sometimes go inside and look myself. A few days later, one of my coworkers who knew, do we know where this is going? Oh dear, that's funny. A few days later, one of my coworkers who knew that I stitched came to my office and gave me a stack of charts. I thanked her and we talked for a while, but I did not look at the charts until I got home that evening and realized that they were some of the charts that I had taken to the Goodwill. I FaceTimed my sister-in-law to tell her the story and we had the best laugh you can imagine. However, I still have those charts today. Oh, that reminds me of the time. I just talked about her the other day and I can see her beautiful hair and her beautiful face. Oh my goodness, you know who I mean. Stitch All the Things. Christine, Stitch All the Things. You knew who I meant. Stitch All the Things, Christine, when she talked about there was a project that she'd taken to the Goodwill and her husband bought it to give to her and surprise her with it. And I think she tried to get rid of it like 3 times and it kept coming back to her house. That was funny. And I think she ended up stitching it because she figured her husband had bought it for her. Now she really had to stitch it. So that was really funny. This reminded me of that. So Sharon, thank you. That was funny. Okay. The next one is from Lydia. And Lydia writes, Hello, Caroline. My name is Lydia and I am an avid cross-stitcher and crocheter. I have a story that highlights one of the hazards of crafting around pets, particularly cats. I crochet baby blankets for all of my friends and family as they are needed. One night I was working on one such blanket at my friend's house while watching a movie. I was sitting in a chair with my project on my lap and the project bag full of yarn sitting on the floor next to me. I was happily working on my blanket while also observing the movie on TV. When I noticed the yarn getting sticky, and then it unexpectedly ended. I was quite confused for a number of reasons, not the least of which was because the ball of yarn I'd been working from was still quite large the last time I had checked it. I leaned over to check my project bag for more yarn when I see Harlow, my friend's cat, sitting next to it purring. Unbeknownst to anyone, she had decided to investigate my project bag and had started chewing on the yarn as it was moving from the bag to my project, until eventually she chewed through the yarn. More exasperated than angry, I lightly scolded Harlow, rescued my project bag, and put my project away to work on later. Since then, if I crochet around Harlow, I keep my yarn in my lap, protected from hungry kittens. I should note that I have 2 cats of my own, Jack and Chloe, who are not chewers like Harlow. If they interact with my yarn, which is rare, they bat at the yarn balls to knock them to the ground and then proceed to chase them around the room. Usually, though, they just ignore my yarn and my crocheting in favor of laying in my lap and napping. On the night in my story, I had forgotten that Harlow was a notorious chewer. She likes to chew on shoestrings and zipper pulls, and figured she would mostly ignore my yarn the way that my cats do. Clearly, I was wrong. Hopefully, my story will serve as a reminder to other crafters that just because your pets will ignore your crafts doesn't mean other people's pets will. Happy crafting, Lydia. It's funny, these stories that are woven into our projects, and then, you know, whenever we work on them again or use that particular item that we've made, we always remember those funny things that happened to them. Okay, I have one more story for you today, and I'd like to end on this one because it was sent to me from Candace, but it's not actually Candace's story, and I'll read it to you in just a minute. But the reason I want to end with Candace's email is because Candace is the whole reason I started doing these funny crafting story, visits together with you, because she had sent me a funny story about a cone of 310 that she'd bought. And it was kind of a mistaken purchase, and hilarity ensued because it was more 310 than Candace can use in her lifetime. And she and her students that she was teaching at the time that it arrived, because of course it was so funny, and she shared it with her students over the Zoom class that they were having, and her students thought it was quite funny, and they actually named it. They named the cone of 310 because she stuck some googly eyes on it, and they named it Threadrick. And so Candace had sent me an email a couple of weeks back, and I thought I had responded to her, and I actually saw her other email again today, and I realized that there was no thingy behind. I responded to her in my head, didn't actually hit the reply button. So Candace, if you're seeing this, you'll know that that I did read that original email. I think her students still ask her about the contest that she is responsible for starting, because my family choose a winner from these funny stories that I'm reading. And so the last batch of stories that I just read, we chose 2 winners from that. And so starting today, we're starting a new contest. And so we'll run it I'll read these stories over the next 6 weeks or so. And then in 6 weeks, I'll choose another 1 or 2 winners, and you get to choose a project bag from the shop. So Candace was discussing it with her students, and her students wanted to know, did they choose the winners? And they were hoping that we could name it the Threadrick Award. So if you win the funny crafting story, you will be awarded the Threadrick Award, which is getting to choose a project bag from the shop. So there you go. All right, so Candace sent me, this was again way back in February. I got completely sidetracked there. Sarah came back in from an appointment that she had, and I lost my train of thought where I was. I know I was finishing up with Candace's email here. And I told you about the Threadrick Award. So here we go. Okay, so Candace's email, she sent me this, and this is actually from her friend. So she says, "Hi Caroline, my friend wanted to share this story with you, but she keeps forgetting to write down your email," from Candace. So this email story is from Heather. "In my 20s, I made a lot of beaded wedding samplers for people. They were usually simple designs with their names, the date, and a floral border on 18 count Aida. I was commissioned to make one for my boss's son's wedding. It was the first time I was being paid to make something, and I didn't have much time to complete it. I traditionally do all of my needlework in hand on Aida, even beading. Back then, I used to sit with my knees up and stitch against my legs. The deadline was running out for the piece, and I was frantically finishing up the last bit of beading the night before it was due. I finished in time, albeit late. I was so pleased and satisfied and proud of my work. As I stood up, I realized that I had stitched the piece to my jeans. No, really, to my jeans. I was horrified. So decision time, take out the beading? Nope. I took off my jeans, got out my seam ripper, and removed the clothing from the cross stitch. The piece was turned in on time, and I added some clever patches to the jeans. That's good. That is good. Can you imagine? Oh, that's funny, Heather. Good story. All right, so that is it for me today. I'm going to wrap things up here. We have some fun and exciting things happening in the shop over the next little while. I mentioned on Monday that you're going to be want to be watching out for a video from Jacob of my modern folk embroidery. I think on Monday I had said Saturday. Jacob actually has plans to put that video out tomorrow afternoon, which is Friday. And it's going to be Friday around 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time that Jacob's video is going to be live. And there will be a shop update at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at the same time that Jacob's video goes live. And I'm pretty excited about it. It's going to be a lot of fun. I can't wait. There might be another stitch along involved. And if you know me at all, it's more of a start along, and you are welcome to join in at any time. It's very exciting to me. Anyways, I will see you all around at some point, you know, over the course of the next few days, either on Instagram. You can find me at Off the Grid Needlearts or at Evertotes. You can find me in the Facebook group, Friday Off the Grid, where usually on Friday nights, we like to put on our cozy pants and have a stitching party by ourselves and share our progress photos in the group. And I will be back on Monday with a floss tube update. So until then, take care. I hope you're well. I hope you're safe and that you have some stitching to enjoy this weekend. And on that note, I'll see you on Monday. Take care, everybody. Happy stitching.